Probably I've been selected to speak first because archaeology is about the past. So we start with the things which were hidden way back. But I would like to clarify that for me, archaeology is about now and even the future. It's about material history, which is reflecting where we come from and where we're going to. And I choose the subject of the metro line because it just opened, and so it's still in actuality. But I think it's a very good example. You see also the word River AMSTEL, about a variation of urban reflections in the archaeological field, and specifically in this case, the reflection of the river itself as a medium of material which is related to urban life. I will give you some examples of that, and I will try to illustrate what kind of different rhythms you can discover in material remains. Well, the NorthSouth Line, very simple, goes from north to south. It was a simple idea, but it led to a lot of complications on technical level, social level, financial level, but at the end it has been realized. But the major challenge in terms of engineering is that the line had to go through the historical center of Amsterdam. I won't go into details about all the political and administrative discussions, but one of the major offsets was that the city government demanded to avoid any damage to the built environment, like what happened in the 1980s during the construction of the East Line. So new techniques had to be developed, even techniques which were experimental. In fact, the decision was to make a tunnel at 25 to 30 meters of depth. And not only this technical solution was chosen by tunneling, which was never done before in this kind of soft soil, but to avoid any contact with the built environment, the engineers also decided to follow open spaces in the city center to have the maximum guarantee that no foundations of buildings would be touched. And that meant in reality that in the first kilometer of the metro, the line was following the riverbed of the River AMSTEL. Here you see Amsterdam in its full medieval extension, a rather small city in between the Singel and the Kloofnietsburgwal and the Gelderskade. And there you see immediately what it means in terms of spatial and topographical relation, what the NorthSouth Line meant for archaeologists. It gave access, not the tunnel is at 30 meters of depth, and we talk about geologically 100,000 before present. That was not our aim as city archaeologists. We wanted to retrieve material related to the city life itself. And that was accumulated in the riverbed, because a river, any water, a canal, a ditch, anywhere in the world, people have the same instinctive behavior. When they want to get rid of their garbage, they throw it in water and it is washed away, it sinks away, you don't see it. Easy thing. Now we have a lot of problem with plastic. But it started already ages ago. So there were two major building sites which were created vertical building sites, giving access from ground level to 30 meters of depth, going through the riverbed and giving access to what we thought very rich deposits. That was a theory when we started in 2003. To give you an idea, I will focus on one of these sites, the Rockin. And the Rockin was looking like this up till 1937. If you were walking in the city in the 1980s, on the Rockin you saw a very dreadful little parking lot with some cars. But up till 1937 it was open water and part of the river system of the River AMSTEL, which entered the city here and went to the Ij, where Central Station was built in 1880. And this stretch of town, this stretch of the river bed was transformed into a building site. Here we have a three-dimensional model of the building pit which was created in the soil and then needed to be excavated to give access from ground level to the level of 30 meters where the tunnel was entering, and the platforms had to be built which now are accessible. According to our theory, this building pit was not just soil, but it had a structure. And this is a design we made to prove to the city council that we had to work there. We made it on a beer filter, that is a very old Dutch system, to prove that we had to be integrated in the civil engineering, because here you have a section of the building pit with the deep walls facing north with a roof, and this had to be excavated from 0 to 30 meters. And for the engineers it was just sand and peat, but for us we believed that there was a structure representing the riverbed itself, and that all these layers were filled with material remains up to a depth of what we estimated 12-15 meters. And then you had the geological layers of all the landscape. You see, archaeology is not only about material culture and culture, it also has to do with landscape, environment, geology. So it has a physical aspect and it has a cultural aspect. The physical aspect also means that we had to integrate our work into this kind of very large-scale, heavy-duty excavation methods. Here you see the roof. In fact, that's the street, because the city life continued. The tram, the pedestrians, the cars, they did what they wanted to do. This is 2005, and during 3 years, underneath this roof, this building site has been excavated every time a stretch of 5 meters of sand or soil was taken away. Then the building site was reinforced, and that was repeated 5 times up to a level of 30 meters. For archaeologists, that was the occasion to be confronted face to face with the riverbed itself. So one of our tasks was to document on that specific moment the physical appearance of the river, because there was no physical information about the structure of the river, and there are even a lot of debates and theories about the genesis of the river in the Paleolithic, in the old landscape. I won't go into details, but I will show you that in fact, underneath the soil, underneath the roof, we encountered a kind of basic idea of a river landscape, and very ordered. A lot of people think water, river, current, floods, it's all chaotic underwater. But here you see a very systematic stratigraphy. I mean, it's a difficult word for layers. And each layer is representing a phase in the genesis and the development of the river, first as a part of the natural landscape, going back to 4000 before present, and then gradually turning into a urban artery as the main waterway in the city center of Amsterdam, around which the city was also established in the 12th century. And here you see the sand of 1937. Here you see the 19th century with the Geneva bottle. Here you see the next layer, 18th century, and it's a very V-shaped, confined riverbed. Then we're going to a next level. Here we're looking at the river from 7 meters to, let's say, 12 meters, 11 meters, and you see completely different physical appearance. I believe that this is the context, the spatial context. If we look at rhythm and we look at material remains, you also, in archaeology, always have to see them in a spatial context. Archaeology is material history with time and space. Here you see the space. You see different river structures, different phases. Here's an older one cut through a younger one. This is 14th century. This is going back to prehistoric time. A very complicated situation, just in the middle of the city, underneath the ground where you're walking and doing your shopping. And here, this is the last level I will show you, in geology. This is the transition from the Holocene. That's the area we are living in which also the landscape around us has been created and has been developed from the 11th century onwards. This is the peat landscape, and here on this transition you see the sand of the glacial ice age period. So on this level you should imagine that 120,000 years ago mammoths were walking from here to England because there was no North Sea. Just to give you an idea about, and this is 12 meters, that's a very sharp transition. It's everywhere underneath Amsterdam, because without this sand layer our buildings would not have been founded on any solid ground, because above here it's all peat and sand, and this is what we call the first sand layer, where all the foundation piles of Amsterdam touch ground. I want to finish also with the geological thing, just to show that all the pictures were transformed into a digital system. The slide before you saw the empty building site. That is a digital 3D model. We made sections every so many meters of all the different layers, and we glued them together into a reconstruction of the morphology of the river with different layers, different periods, and different geological situations. That gave a whole new idea about what this river means and what the landscape means. That's the spatial surrounding in which you should see all the finds. Because the second aspect of archaeology, material history, is about material remains made by man, and in this case discarded into the river, and also as a second category of objects, lost items. Yeah, you can imagine you're looking over the bridge and your glasses fall in and then it's gone. And all that material remains. And in land situations there is much more dynamics of human interference, but things which fall in the water, they sink away and they stay there. On land excavations you always have material remains which are related to the social context of that specific site. So a building has been used as a house or a church or a workshop. So the material deposits are related to those activities which are specifically defined by the people working or living on that spot. The material remains from the River AMSTEL, or from this river, are a cross-section of material culture circulating in the city through all ages, without any respect of social status or origin. Everything is accumulated by the river. In fact, what I would like to say is that the river, talking about urban rhythms, is a very democratic medium, giving everything which was fallen in and giving it back now. And the quantity of material, we made a prediction that there would be material inside that riverbed. Here you see a close-up. But in fact, what we retrieved from those two sites, Rockin and Damrak, is as much as we excavated in 40 years in the whole city. The working title of our project was, on a certain moment, 700,000 finds. And one of the ways we retrieved them is by also integrating material, technical solutions. This looks very industrial, and it looks very, designed, but it's a potato sieving machine. But we use it not to sieve potatoes, but to get all the finds which were pumped up from underneath the building sites over conveyor belts. And even the smallest materials like thimbles and coins could be retrieved. So it gave a really detailed and massive amount of urban reflection. This is archaeological reflection. Thousands and thousands of bags with garbage, which people have been throwing away through all the centuries, and the city archaeologists paid by you with tax money worked very hard to get all the garbage out again, but transform it into information. And the information was very diverse, because the sites were, some of the sites we were working, like Damrak, when we started to work there in 2005, were open water. So the youngest material culture reflection of the city was the material culture of our period. But at the same time, you see, if you excavate a mobile phone from the 1980s, how rapid material culture and your material environment is changing. Because if you show this to a kid of 5 years old, they don't understand that you can phone with this without swiping. And so every item has a historical and functional context. I will give you some examples, But first of all, again, back to the spatial context of urban reflections in material sense, in archaeological sense. Archaeology, urban archaeology, is a topographical related history. A topographical in the sense that each part of town has a different function and a different set of activities which define the material output. So what I just said, each individual house, when you excavate there, has its own specific thing. But here, this is the building site of Rockin, has been receiving remains the material deposits of the activities of all, this whole complete city area. And there are all kinds of distinctions which you can make between the east side and the west side. These were convents up till 1600. This is living areas, it's turning into workshops. So there is a topographical framework which is the starting point for the interpretation of the urban reflection. And in fact, what we did is turning that piece of riverbed into a data machine by three-dimensional GIS. So in fact, this is a visual representation of the database of all the finds ordered in the stratigraphical. That's why the geology is so important. We have to start with the spatial context. And these are the different layers. But at the same time, you can take pieces of the river out and question them on its content. So, for example, you can ask the database, give me everything from 1620, or give me everything with a yellow color, or give me everything from this section in this part of the river. So the river is transformed from a mute thing, because archaeological finds are dumb. They don't talk, they're damaged, they don't have meaning, and the meaning is given by interpretation. So archaeology is very subjective. It's the reflection we think, and we try to be so objective as possible by using all kinds of verifiable data sets. I will show you 3 examples or how you can deal with material residue from the river as a source of information of city life as an urban reflection. And I will start with a thing which I just made yesterday, so it's very crude, but it shows rhythm on the basis of quantity. And I will show you to you. And what you see is the Rockin. This is east, this is west. And each 25 years things are changing. But this is only based on quantity, no distinction in function, just time and quantity. And what you see is that there are different intensities, I will show you again, which are related, I think, with certain urban developments. For example, a very important urban development in Amsterdam is the year 1578, when Catholic administration, government was abolished, and the Protestant rule was established, which still was up till 1900 the only religion accepted in Amsterdam. But together with the political change, something else happened, that all the property of the Catholic Church, for example convents, were turned into new public functions. And what you see is that before that time, the east side had some intensities, and on the west side it was very low activity. And then suddenly you see around 1600 that a whole new activity pattern comes, which is concentrating on the west side and then slowly covering both sides again in the 19th century. So this is a very crude image, but it shows that even on quantity you can already start with some interpretations. Okay, the second example I want to give is about function. Here, idea of the workshop, 700,000 finds, bags full of garbage, things, which has to be given meaning. Without meaning, you can't work with them. So we have to do interpretation on what I said, time. I just gave you an example, but also on use, on function. And of course, function is different levels. You can have the function of the object itself, like here, you have different functions. But you also have the function in context. And we developed a classification system to measure the rhythm of urban remains within its urban context. So this is a classification of, according to 10 urban functions we think are essential for the phenomena of a city. So a city is a built environment, a three-dimensional environment. So here, for example, are all the remains which has to do with building, like bricks and tiles. And a city is a place with interiors, like furniture. It's always a center of distribution. A city is a center of production. People process food and consume. In relation to the countryside, surrounding countryside, the city is always a space of knowledge. So science and technology, everything to do with measuring, for example, is connected to, archaeologically is classified here. A city is a place of defense, of safety. Safety, you need arms, unfortunately, in this society. Then a very important aspect of the city is it's a place of communication. So in this chapter we accumulated everything to do with, from book printing to mobile phones, but also religion, money, proof, all those kinds of things which has to do with exchanging things. At the end, the city is always a place of relaxation, so you have here everything to do with recreation, and this last chapter is the people themselves, their personal belongings. We made a number of different products to convey as many different people as possible. And one of the things is this book. It's called Spul or Stuff, two editions. And it's a catalogue based on this classification system with no text. So it's 13,000 pictures in which the items are ordered according to this rhythm, according to this urban rhythm. And what you see immediately on this page, for example, this is the page of craft and production, and this is about fire making. And you see immediately that you recognize a lighter, so you say, oh, this is fire making. But because we decided to have a functional reflection, an urban reflection, and not through categories based on material, for example, or age, for the first time you see two different lighters together. These are lighters too from the 15th century. And otherwise you would have been thinking that those are boksbeugels. But in fact it's the same thing. I don't think there was then a coffee shop called Reaver, but anyway it belongs to the same category of material items to do with that urban function. So you see here from the river a rhythm of fire making. Here's another example, another page from the book, another spread from the book. This is about toys, and this is a page with toys of things you throw. You throw or roll balls. These are little balls from wood or plastic. And then you come to flippos you recognize when you bought your chips 10 years ago. And these are the same things as these things, but these are 4 centuries older. So here you have again this combination of time in the context of function. So that is the second level of rhythm in material remains. You have quantity, you have function, and these are all patterns. But a final category to finish this short presentation is about individual stories, the narratives, because each find has its own background story and can be related to other stories or even to people. So I give you 2 examples of individual stories in which an archaeological find is a frozen moment in time and tells a story on a specific place, of a specific time, of a specific subject related to, in this case, urban history. This is the wheel of a car, and luckily the maker of the car already put the name of the car on it, so we didn't have to find that out, because a lot of finds, they don't have identity. We have to find the identity. So, and then you think, why should you as archaeologists excavate and keep in the municipal collection the wheel of a fort? Well, in this case, because it's well documented, and probably in Detroit or wherever there are archives, and this car has been documented in detail, technical drawings. But in this case, it's related to a narrative, to a specific moment in time on the Rockin, where a car hit the water and lost its wheel somewhere before 1937. I show you water because after 1937 the water was gone, and that meant a very profound transition in the being of the city, which started from 1880 with the building of Central Station, which meant a cutoff of the harbourfront and the maritime infrastructure of the city of Amsterdam. A lot of canals were filled in, and Rockin was one of the last ones. But you know, where you're now biking, like on Nieuwezijds Voorburgwal, that was all canals, the Spui. So there was, in those years, in the beginning of the 20th century, there was a gradual transition from a maritime-based, water-based city into a city which was transforming its transport system into tramways and cars. And I think we now, a century later, again, on a new transition from cars to bicycles, which go faster than cars now. And then you say, okay, this is wonderful. Now we can go look into newspapers to find an accident which can be related to this find of the wheel. And then you have a one-to-one story. And the most direct relation, of course, was that I could say that this is the event of leading to that archaeological find. I'm a generalist, so I know nothing about cars. But luckily we have specialists, so they were studying this photograph, and they said, sorry, this car is not a Ford, but it's a Buick. So here we have a failure in connecting the archaeological remain and the historic event, but it's the same time, it's an example of an archaeological finds as a narrative can be used in a larger context, in the development of the city itself. This is a more classic example. These are bones of animals, the remains of meat production, because they all have been butchered. They have traces of knives and axes. And like I said, archaeology is material history in time and space. So what we always do, we make spatial representations. And here you see the distribution of bones into the Rockin. I showed you before the quantity thing, so there are patterns which change into time. But this is a representation in space of one specific rhythm of bones. And then you see that there are very specific concentrations which are related to the urban infrastructure, namely those two alleys. And everybody who was walking in Amsterdam in 1650 would know that if you would look into the alley, you would see this, and you would walk into the nest to this building, and you would enter the city meat hall. So these bones, which we found here in 2008, are the reflection, are the rhythm, the reflection of the rhythm of the butcher servants who at the end of the day brought the garbage from this slaughterhouse illegally to the River Amstel, and then at the end of the evening they dumped it into the river. And 4 centuries later, this pattern, this behavior was still visible in a material context. So this is a very clear example of material rhythm. To finish, I don't know if you ever had the occasion to travel with the NorthSouth Line, but as I said, we looked for all different ways to tell the story about what this river means for us as citizens and inhabitants and visitors of Amsterdam. So we made a book, we made a movie, we made a website. I will show you at the end, but I think you already had it in the program announcement. But we also made a tangible, rhythmic representation of the finds in the entrances, the 2 entrances, the south and the north entrance of the Station de Rockin. These are designs, ideas from the 2003 or 5, we already had the idea that we had to do something with all these finds, and the only space available was between the escalators, because everything else is safety rules and high cost. So with the architect, we invented this idea of, and we were part of the art scheme of the station, and we worked together with the artists. We also designed the sculptures, the mosaics on the platform walls. And what we basically did is using that same classification system without any explanation and give it back to the visitors, unexpected visitors, because when you travel with the metro, you're not expecting you're going to a museum. Most people who go to a museum, they already know what they're going to see, so they're prepared. Here you are confronted with material remains which are not explained, but you can see rhythms. You can, for example, this is from the chapter consumption. You see everything. You see the whole series, a representation of spoons, starting with the oldest one from 1400 and ending with plastic spoons from ice things from 2008. The same for knives. And we assembled all these panels together in those two showcases over, I think, over 90 panels altogether, containing 10,000 finds. And again, they are not labeled, so you don't. But you can see, like the river is a democratic medium without making distinction. This is also a democratic representation because we gave it to the people to make their own ideas about what they see. And I assure you that if you look at it time after time, and commuters do that, then suddenly people start to recognize patterns, they start to recognize rhythms, and they start to understand that there is a coherence and an interaction between all these different items. So this is before the opening. But another thing is, not unlike a museum, you can stand in front of a painting or a showcase and have your time looking at it. But here, the escalator is just moving, so when you finally see the object you want to see, you're already gone. And that's why we made this website. First of all, you can make an English or a Dutch version, so I put them now in English on the homepage, and there you see already a number of items where you really are interested in the background. So there is a whole series of articles on the excavations, there is a documentary with English subtitles, and then it's 45 minutes giving background information on all on the project itself and all the things. Well, I'll go out of that again. Okay, but the main thing is homepage. It's 3 sections. One is a database with 20,000 pictures representing all the categories of finds with all the background information, and you can make your own. You do your own research. We offered the finds in a chronological rhythm, so it's a chronology that's also below the surface, going from now back in time below the surface to the very early start, and that's well. See, the oldest thing is 120,000 before Christ. I will show you what it is. Those are little shells and little bones from here. These things, they come from 30 meters of depth and belong to a subtropical sea, the Aim Sea, which was here when there was nothing else, even no mammoth. But you can also go through time at your own ease. You click 1700 and you get all the objects from that period, and then you can click on any individual object and you get all the background information. So the second thing which you can do with this website, and that's in fact the origin, the basic thing, is that you have access to the 2 showcases in a very high detailed resolution. You can zoom in, so when you are on the escalator or you are sitting in the metro after you saw this. Anyway, each object which you select from the showcase, gives you access again to the database, and again you can get all the information, and then you go back to the database to the. So this gives you, as a traveler, the background information. And the third thing is, and that's the most fun part, is that you can make your own showcase with the 20,000 pictures which have been which are available in the website. We have now like these kinds of creations made by people all over the world using the archaeological. We now this website is in the air for 4 months, and we now have 2,200, almost 2,300 individual creations made by people, and some are very basic and some are very complicated, with with the most beautiful things, I think, in which, and that I think is really challenging, that people use archaeological finds or the icons which we created of those finds, those high resolution pictures, to make their own history and to make their own. People like, it's introduction to archaeology according to somebody, and somebody thinks this is cool stuff. But the fun part is that if you click on it, it's still archaeology. It's now a creative representation made by somebody, but each find is still a piece of information related to the database. And I think here we have the circle closed, that a thing which was fallen into the river was transformed into in an information set in relation to the river, and then supplied with information through which you can use it to make a urban history. And you can use the database also from the website, and then make your own rhythms and make your own questions, ask your own questions to the material reality represented and reflected by the River Amstel. Thank you very much.